booktube. It's Marilyn Maya. And first of all, before I start my book tag, I want to thank Kim at Middle of the Book March for talking about a video I did that's going to be in the description box. I really appreciate Kim, and I want to welcome all my new subscribers and welcome back all those who have stayed with me. So today I'm doing the Body book tag by Brandon at Brandon's Bookshelf. And this is an original tag, and I had watched a few videos that really made me want to do the tag, but then I realized that it was going to turn into more of a my favorite books kind of tag, and I wanted to, take a little liberty with his tag. So without further ado, let's get on to the tag. So he has 10 prompts dealing with parts of the body, but you can, interpret them however you want. And I've taken a little liberty with that. So prompt 1 is the brain or the intellect. Now, I believe that reading is the brain and the intellect. And every time I read a book, I'm using my brain. And so the first book that I have for brain is somebody who used his much bigger brain to help other people. And that's Dean Ornish. And his program for reversing heart disease is a classic. And this is his newer edition of the book. It has a new introduction. I've talked about it before. And I suffer from a form of heart disease. And because of his book, it's a comprehensive program. So it kind of changed my whole life. And not only did it make me healthier, but I just love dipping in and out of it because he has some recipes. He talks about not only health, but like how to reverse heart disease, but how to make yourself happier. And I think that this comprehensive book is brainy and made me use my brain, and it shows how smart he is. I had other ideas for brain, but I'm going to come back to it. The second prompt is the mouth voices. And for this, I could have talked about Rena's Promise, that I was very happy to hear from a new channel to me, Ursula's Odds and Sods. And I have 2 copies of this book, and basically it's about 2 sisters who were on the first transport to Auschwitz, and they both survived, but they went through, horrible times and voices because they made their voices heard after they came out and they survived. But instead of doing that, I'm going to, I did do that, but I'm going to put to your attention A Train in Winter. And this book was a surprise, and I got it in San Francisco, my only trip to San Francisco, at the City Lights bookstore. And what was special to me about this book, beside the book itself, is that I was practically blind when I went there, but I wasn't coming to terms with that. So I was sort of like looking around and feeling my way, and so it was sort of a surprise that I got such a wonderful book. I sort of, I know what general part of the store I am. I'll just pick a book because I couldn't see anything, and then until I got my cataract surgery. But A Train in Winter is it's an extraordinary book about friendship between women at a concentration camp. But unlike, like Rena's Promise, where she's Jewish, these were teachers, students, chemists, writers, and housewives, a singer at the Paris Opera, a midwife, a dental surgeon. So why were they sent to a labor camp? Um, because they distributed anti-Nazi leaflets, printed subversive newspapers, hid resistors, secreted Jews to safely, transported weapons, and conveyed clandestine messages. The youngest was a schoolgirl of 16 who scrawled V for victory on the walls of her lycée. And that's a school, I know that, in Paris. The eldest, a farmer's wife in her 60s, who harbored escaped Allied airmen. Strangers to one another, hailing from villages and cities across France, 230 brave women united in defiance of their Nazi occupiers. They were hunted down, separated from home and loved ones, and imprisoned in a fort outside of Paris. And then in 43, they were sent to their final destination in Auschwitz. This book really touched me. It was their friendships, and a lot of them survived just because of their friendships. Yes, they were treated better than a lot of the other inmates in Auschwitz in general. And I'm talking about the Romani, the Gypsies, the Jews, etc. But yeah, the one part that really, really touched me was they were wondering where one of their friends had gone to, and she had they didn't know how she died. They just walked into the women's section of Auschwitz, and she died right there. The shock of being in a place like that, that touched me. And I really recommend Marilyn Moorehead, A Train in Winter, for a different aspect of the Holocaust. Now the third prompt is the heart, feeling. Well, that can be a lot of books, right? We have feelings for books. But for this prompt, I picked 2 books, but I'm only going to talk about one. And the first book I picked was, I always say, the only book that my mother, the only gift I gave her that she ever kept or appreciated. Here it is. And it's a historical fiction book, The Ginger Tree, by Oscar Wynd. And I talked about it before, so I'll just go into it really briefly. It's the compelling story of a woman, 20-year-old Mary Mackenzie. She sets sail for China with a frugal trousseau and a suffocating chaperone. But she's a Scotswoman, lively, curious, unspoiled. The year is 1903, and it will not be long before she scandalizes the British in Peking by falling into an adulterous affair with a young Japanese nobleman. And my mother loved this book. Like I said, it's the only gift I ever gave her that she said was, she didn't even say it was good. I mean, she said it was good, but it was the only gift that she didn't criticize, let's put it that way. But for this one, I had to go with my heart. And this is not a good copy of this book. It's a play. It's called The Widowing of Mrs. Holroyd by D.H. Lawrence. And I talked about this many a time because I was 25 when I saw the play on PBS Theater, and I had to read it. And at that time, you were able to get a copy out of the library. Now it's very difficult. It's out of print. So I got this print-on-demand copy from Amazon, but it still has the beautiful words of D.H. Lawrence. It really is one of his first plays and one of his first works, and it's very autobiographical. And it tells about Mrs. Holroyd, who comes from a higher class of background and marries a coal miner. And he's very brutal, he's a womanizer, and there's a romance between her and the electrician who works in the coal mine. It never comes to fruition in the book, but as you can see from the title, she does become a widow. But the words are so beautiful. George Bernard Shaw said when he saw the play that it made him ashamed of his own writing. And George Bernard Shaw, Pygmalion. So it is beautiful. I suggest that if you don't want to read a play, that you find it somewhere. I haven't found it again yet. The adaptation that I saw of this was actually Southern USA company, a small little company in the Southern USA. But it was so, to my 25-year-old mind, it was romantic, it was beautiful, the words just blew me away. So that's my third prompt, the hard feeling. Okay, so now the fourth prompt, the arm, strength. I was going to go with yoga here, but I have that for another, another prompt. So I have to say that I'm going to say strength. The strength of finding out how to cure my anxiety. And there are a lot of books that I can talk about. Well, actually, all these books. But if I have to say one book that helped me the most, it's Wishcraft. And it's by Barbara Scher with Annie Gottlieb. And you can say it's about how to find what you really want to do with your life. And it gave me a lot of ideas about how to get out of a depression, because there's so many interesting, ways of, it has hard times in here, brainstorming, finding out what you really want, goal searching, and it really gave me a lot of hours of not thinking about anxiety. So I talked about this, and Margaret Pinard loved this book as well. So, check out her channel too, because she has a lot of good ideas about nonfiction, as well as Nonfiction November is coming soon. All right, so the next prompt is the elbow. Okay, humor. I love humorous books, but everybody has a different sense of humor. But I found this book, Our Spoons Came from Woolworths by Barbara Comyns. I found this since I started BookTube. I found this hilarious in parts. And the horrible part is it's about two starving artists in England in the 50s. And a lot of it is pretty grim. But I want to read you a little part of it. She's having a baby with a horrible husband. I think he's her husband. I can't remember. I have to reread it. But so she's poor, and she has to go to a charity hospital to have her baby. So I'm going to read you a few lines. When we arrived at the hospital, we went down the familiar steps to the basement and found it all locked up. Then we went up the stairs through the front door. The doorman touched his hat, and I felt proud, as if I had graduated to the 6th form. We spoke to an elderly nurse who appeared from somewhere, and I was taken to a dreary room with a lot of dark brown paint all over the place. I was given a bundle of hospital clothes and told to undress and fold my clothes up neatly for my husband to take home. I didn't like parting with my clothes. It made it seem so prison-like. I couldn't escape if I wanted to without any clothes. The hospital clothes were a very poor exchange for mine. They were simply awful. A gray flannel shirt, pink cotton dressing gown, and some really frightful white cotton stockings. I tried to leave them off, but the elderly nurse appeared again and made me put them on. Then I had to lie down on a kind of bed arrangement, and she brought Charles in to say goodbye. Charles is the husband. I felt so ashamed for him to see me wearing these ghastly clothes, and as soon as he saw me, he started laughing and said, "Darling, if you only knew how funny you looked." I did, and I hope I wouldn't die in case he always remembered me like that. When he had finished laughing, he kissed me, and the nurse told him to come back in the morning. Then he had gone, and I felt dreadfully alone. I have to go on just a little bit more. After he had gone, such a lot of things happened. I must have been in at least 7 different wards and beds before the baby came. They kept me on the move all the time, and the only thing I wanted was to be left alone in privacy. I must have given up the famous pink card and been examined by a doctor, but I can't remember quite what happened. It just goes on and on from there, and it's hilarious the way she's has to have her bag in her hospital bag bed as she's taken to all these different places in the hospital before she has her baby. I just laughed because it actually reminded me a little, and I didn't give birth in a charity hospital, but of the way, in a way you were treated in 69 to 72. But the book is Our Spoons Came from Woolworths, and it's so underrated on BookTube, and Barbara Comyns is just a wonderful writer, an unusual writer. I read The Vet's Daughter by her, and I highly recommend her as an author. Okay, so what is next? Okay, so Prom 6 is the stomach, and for that I could have gone with a few books. It's called A Taste of Puerto Rico by Yvonne Ortiz. And when I got married, I was very young. I didn't know how to cook, and I needed a book to learn. I actually learned how to cook by other women, Latino women who lived in my building and actually, taught me how to cook. But when I wanted to expand, I went to cookbooks, and I found this book, which is still really relevant right now. There's another book that I wanted to talk about, and that's The Blue Zones. And it's lessons from for living longer from the people who've lived the longest. This is not only a good book about food and stomach, but it's also a good travel book, which is coming up now, how Dan Buettner goes to all these places and finds out how these centennials have reached the ripe old age and what they have in common with each other. Okay, so number 7 is The Groin, or Romance. I could have talked about The Lover by Marguerite Dumas, because I found that to be a sexy book. She's a young girl who gets involved, and I think it's in Vietnam. She's French. She gets involved with a Chinese man in Vietnam, I think. And it had a lot of sexy bits on it that I liked at that time. But if I have to be honest, a book that is less sexy and but was romantic to me, here it is, Joy in the Morning by Betty Smith, of course, who wrote A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And it's partly autobiographical too. All her books are. And what this is, in 1927 in Brooklyn, New York, Carl Brown and Annie McGarry meet and fall in love. They're only 18. Annie travels alone halfway across the country to the Midwestern University where Carl is studying law, and then they marry. But their first year together is much more difficult than they anticipated, in a faraway place with little money. With hardship and poverty, Anne and Carl come to realize that their greatest source of strength, loyalty, and love will help them make it through. And Joy in the Morning comes from a Bible verse, which I didn't know at the time, but it's a psalm. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And this book was very interesting because it starts out in Brooklyn. His parents are against their relationship. They get married very young, and they move so he can go to college. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it is romantic. One part of the part that I found very romantic is every night she would sit on his lap, and they would talk about their day together, and it became like, there was a rocking chair, and she sat on his lap, and I found that romantic at the time. Well, what is the next prompt? Okay. Prompt 8 is hands or work. And for that one, I'm also going to go back to Wishcraft, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wrote poetry. I wanted to be an interpreter at the UN. I wanted to act. I wanted to sing. But none of these things were practical for the way I was brought up, very poor. And also the fact that I got married very young to escape my chaotic childhood. So, but this book gave me hope that one day I would be able to find work that would satisfy me. And eventually I went to college, became a teacher, became a social worker, and was able to help others who had similar problems that I had with finding myself, you can say. All right, so prompt 9 is the legs, fitness. And Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads showed me, we were buddy reading a book, and she showed me a book on Voxer by Twyla Tharp called Keep Moving. And I really should. Twyla Tharp, by the way, was a famous choreographer and dancer, or I should say dancer and choreographer. And what I remember about her is that she choreographed Oklahoma, and that it was very avant-garde, modern, modern dance at its, beginning, at its, most beautiful. But I don't have, even though I danced, I was a dancer, I don't have any books about dancing, but I do have a book that is yoga, which has become very important to me. And it's Bikram. Now, Bikram is kind of a controversial character, Bikram Chowdhury, and but he has a sequence of yoga, hot yoga. I've never been to any of his studios. I live in Hawaii, where all I have to do basically is wait for like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, go upstairs, and it'll be as hot as a yoga studio, and then I do yoga. So yeah, so I love yoga. I've always loved yoga, and since I've become, my mobility has been compromised, I find that moving, dancing, I still dance. I might suffer for it the next day, but I do dance, I do yoga, and I do walk even though I'm walking with a cane. So, yeah, I love yoga. Now, the last prompt is the foot. So, or travel. I don't have any travel books on my shelf. Yet, if you would have visited my apartment in 1972, that's all you would have seen. Now, if anybody remembers the 5-day Frommer's book to Europe, if you know, you know, they really inspired me and taught me that I didn't have to have a lot of money to travel. And in the 80s, Rick Steves, I know a lot of you are familiar with him through his PBS Europe Through the Back Door, but that was actually a book, Europe Through the Back Door. And if I find a copy, I'll put it over here, because it meant a lot to me. He tells you that you don't have to go through the so-called front door of Europe. He's an art historian, by the way, as well as a travel guru. He has a website as well, ricksteves.com, I assume. And he's saying that most people especially Americans, I guess, go through the front door, you know, the Sheratons, the you know, the 5-star hotels, and they eat in the 5-star restaurants, and they never get to really see a country and meet the people, which is really what traveling is about. And that book became my go-to for traveling with very little money. Anyway, so that's the body tag. And I did it a little different, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that you'll read some of these books, because they meant a lot, and maybe they'll mean something to you if you read them. That's what's so special about BookTube. We can give each other recommendations, as well as talk about books that we own. So thank you so much for joining me, and thank you, Brandon, for making this wonderful original tag. I'm not going to tag anyone, because this was sort of I wasn't tagged, and this is sort of an open tag. So if you want to do it, I think it's very worthwhile. And you might not see this on a Tag Tuesday, because I'm sort of behind almost everyone. So you might see it on a Wednesday. So thank you, and please subscribe. And thank you so much if you have subscribed to my channel. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I'll see you in my next video. Aloha!